My channel is basically themed around all my silly blorbos, and I figured the perfect way to talk about all of them is by ranking them. I will be ranking them based on the following guidelines. 1. How big was the hyperfixation? 2. Did they create any funny situations? 3. How much do I still like them nowadays? Now, please keep in mind that I will be very strict in ranking them. I still love a lot of these characters, but I have to be very harsh in order to rank them properly. Also, I will not be ranking them based on how hot they are entirely ranked upon the guidelines. Here they come in chronological order of when I crushed on them. Joe Dalton. Now this is a funny one, because believe it or not, but Joe Dalton was my first crush ever. I was like 4 years old and me and my family watched the Lucky Luke cartoon every weekend. I remember daydreaming about how I could help Joe Dalton defeat Lucky Luke. Joe is very silly and stupid, but 4-year-old Starny thought that was adorable. This was a very small and innocent crush, and while it's cute to look back on, it's not really that special. And because of that, Joe will be going in D. So, while editing this video, I discovered that there's an episode in the Dalton's cartoon where Joe gets a hot girlfriend? Good for him, I guess? Sonic and Shadow the Hedgehog. I'm going to talk about these two simultaneously, because I've had crushes on both of them, but in different times of my life. While Joe Dalton may have been my first crush ever, Sonic was my very first hyperfixation. Normally as a kid your obsessions kinda come and go, but Sonic wasn't like that. I kid you not, I had a Sonic hyperfixation for years. I was crazy about Sonic, both the character and the franchise. I thought Sonic was the coolest guy ever and I adored him. As a young kid, I never felt anything for Shadow, but that funny enough changed when I was 12 and I rewatched Sonic X. I didn't crush on Sonic anymore, but Shadow? Damn dude, he was so badass to me. I made an OC just so I could ship her with Shadow. The Shadow obsession wasn't nearly as big as the Sonic one though, and it only lasted a couple of weeks. So Sonic definitely deserves an A, but Shadow can honestly go to D for how little impact it had on me. Meta Knight. I'm gonna be real, Meta Knight is the catalyst of this entire list. He is the reason we are here today. I was about 11 years old and was in my Kirby hyperfixation. I knew literally everything about Kirby and I was crushing very badly for Meta Knight. He was the first character that I actively searched fanfics and fanart of. The very first fanfic I ever wrote was about Meta Knight, and it was the story of Fumu and Meta Knight spending the night together on the beach? Or something like that. I unfortunately don't have the fanfic anymore, but I know it was written in very poor English. I also remember showing it to my mom and she was very proud of me. One time I tried to print out this picture of Meta Knight at my school and I told my teacher I needed it for research. Little did she know I just wanted a cool picture of Meta Knight. I feel like I should give Meta Knight a high score with him being such a big part of my internet origins, but I think the others on this list are way more extreme and Meta Knight was much more tame. I think C fits him well. Megamind. If you've seen my Megamind video, I don't even have to explain to you why Megamind is an instant S tier character. He checks all the guidelines. It was funny, extreme, and I still think he's pretty cool to this day. While I may not have a crush on Megamind anymore, I do still really like his design, and the movie is unironically good. An iconic hyperfixation like this belongs in S. Sanji. Sanji is a prime example of a character that checks all the guidelines. The hyperfixation was huge, and even came back bigger than ever after many years. It made for hilarious situations, such as me writing fanfics and making fanarts. I even have a Sanji shrine nowadays and I'm going to cosplay him soon. I still love him so much. This is an instant S tier character. I could talk about Sanji for hours, so if you want to see me ramble about how much I love this man, you can watch my video I made about him. Death the Kid. I find this one hard to rank because Death the Kid is literally a kid. But I felt like I had to include him in this list because 12-year-old Starny was crushing on him really badly. Soul Eater was a fun show, but Death the Kid is what it was all about to me. I made a Soul Eater OC just so I could ship her with Kid. I made so much fan art of them. I even had posters of Kid hanging in my room. I don't think this obsession was that iconic though, and while I think he has a cool design, I feel he belongs in C. Professor Sycamore. This is one I don't talk about very often, but Sycamore had a grip on me from my 14th to 16th. I thought he was the most handsome guy ever. He was my phone lock screen for years and I had a folder full of art of him. One of the reasons I cosplayed Serena was because she and Sycamore were from the same Pokemon game. Also, fun fact, a guy once asked me out on a date by saying he could be my quote-unquote Sycamore. Despite all this though, this was a relatively quiet obsession and didn't go very far outside of my computer screen. So I'm giving Sycamore a high C. Stanford Pines. This was a very big one that I don't talk about nearly enough. When Gravity Falls was still airing, I was obsessed with the show. I was very active in the fandom and I cosplayed Mabel and Bill Cipher. I even made friends based on our Gravity Falls hyperfixation. It was my most favorite show ever, so when Ford got introduced in season 2, you can see where this is going. I had a Tumblr blog with 2,000 followers dedicated to Ford. I wrote so many fanfics about him that I shared on my Tumblr. They are still being read to this day and I still regularly get messages asking for more. Well, I'm sorry guys. I was crazy about Ford and all my friends teased me about it in a fun way. I recently rewatched Gravity Falls and I was really curious if I was going to fall for him again. Well, the answer is no, not really. I can see why I liked him so much because yeah, he's pretty good looking I guess. But it didn't reignite any feelings I had for him. Still, I feel like because of the history I have with him, he definitely deserves to be in a high B. Reagan. I'll be honest with you, I don't actually have that much to say about Reagan. He is extremely handsome, charismatic and funny. He basically has the whole package, you know? He feels like almost too good of a character. But despite all that, I was never that obsessed with him. I mostly just think he's very hot. I was never hyperfixated with him to the point where I did weird things. Like yeah, I would read a fanfic here and there and wow, that's some good art of him, but it didn't go much further than that. I do have this very epic shirt of him though. Reagan gets a low B from me. Pearl. Ah, Pearl. The only girl on this list, and also my bisexual awakening. How good it is to see you here. Yeah, when I saw this picture of Pearl, it awakened something in me. I didn't realize it back then, but that was my bisexual awakening of all things. Pearl is such a weird one because she's both my kinny and a small crush. She is just such a little guy. For the record, I don't sexualize her, I just think she's neat. I cosplayed her a few years ago and I would love to cosplay her other outfits someday. I'm really excited to see her in the Splatoon 3 DLC again and that will probably reignite my hyperfixation in some way again, so I look forward to that. But for now I welcome Pearl to B tier. Eugene. Eugene is just the cutest little guy. To me, he is this tiny, adorable, wholesome little koala. And he just fills me with glee. I had a big obsession with him during the summer of 2020. I have this huge custom pillow of him, a figurine, keychains, and his amiibo card. The little amount of content of Eugene did not stop me from adoring him. I still really like him to this day, but I don't think he was as insanely and hilariously big as some of my other hyperfixations. But Eugene is still getting an A from me. Lupin III. Ooh boy, now this was a hyperfixation. I always feel very strange looking back on this time. Lupin was the only thing on my mind in 2021. He was this perfect middle ground between niche and obscure, but popular enough that he had a very active fandom. Collecting Lupin stuff like figures, plushies and even music was so much fun. I feel like this was one of the hyperfixations with the most peaks in terms of how much happiness he brought me. In terms of funny stuff, Lupin also definitely delivered there. I begged my boyfriend to cosplay him for months. I went to Amsterdam just to get a vinyl and I bought very expensive figures of the cast. It was a really fun time and I still think he's really handsome and cute, so he will be going into S tier. Ingo. The sudden obsession I had with Ingo is very comparable to another Pokemon guy that we will soon be talking about, just on a lower level. It came out of nowhere and it stuck for about a month. I wrote a fanfic about him, shared lots of fan art, and I could not stop talking about Ingo with my friends. The funniest thing about this all though is that I don't really feel anything for him anymore. Like, yeah, sure, he's a cool guy, but that's mostly it. He did get me to write an NSFW fanfic though, so that alone gets him to a high B. Saul Goodman. Saul is a strange one. The thing is, I can't really say I had a hyperfixation with him specifically. It was more so that I had a Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul hyperfixation. I actually went through all of Breaking Bad without even seeing him in a romantic light. He was just a character to me. After finishing Breaking Bad, I watched Better Call Saul and that's when it clicked. After 5 seasons. I was in denial for so long and it's kind of funny looking back. Saul is one of those characters that never had a high peak, so to say, but my crush on him also never died out like some of the others on this list. It's always there on a low fire and when I see him I go awooga! And then after that I'm normal again. I really enjoy seeing art of him and funny memes, but he never made me do anything extreme like buying merchandise. But he is definitely getting a high B. Larry. Oh god, Larry. Now, this is a character I have to make a video about sometime soon. You guys, this man made me do unspeakable things. It's so weird looking back on because nowadays I'm pretty normal about him. Haha, get it? Normal? But I can say for sure, without a shred of doubt, this was the highest peak I've ever had in a hyperfixation. You do not understand, he gave me insomnia for days. I could not sleep because of this man. This nobody of a character. I still don't understand what happened to me during this time, but I can't deny I really enjoyed it. A part of me is curious if this hyperfixation will ever return, and I think that would be really funny. Still though, this hyperfixation only lasted a couple of weeks, and I feel like he can't completely compare to the other S tier characters. So, straight to A you go, Larry. Well folks, there we have it, the Starny Blorbo ranking. I had to be very strict for some of these and I wanted to be as objective as possible. Still, that can of course be hard and I think it's safe to say who my favorite is out of all of them. It may sound strange, but I often wonder what my next hyperfixation will be. I've gotten to the point where I know myself well enough that I know a new hyperfixation is inevitable. It makes me think, does the character exist already? Have I ever seen them before? Do I already know the character? It sounds silly, but I'm so curious about this because the whole concept of a hyperfixation is just so fascinating to me. They have all given me so much joy, and some of them have genuinely brought out the best in me. They have made me pursue art forms such as drawing, writing and cosplay. I wouldn't have done it without them, and I think that's very neat.